be on the pictures. If you could see the clerk at the end, and they'll make sure that you aren't viewed by the general public. If I could move to the agenda now. Apologies for absence.
We've received apologies from Councillor Effersane and Councillor Holbein.
Thank you. The next is urgent business. I've not been notified of any urgent business. Declarations of interest. Has anybody got any interest in any matters before us today? No? Okay. Public question time.
No questions received,
No
Chair.
public questions, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting, could I move them as a correct record?
Second.
That's agreed. Thanks very much indeed. If we then now go on to the applications. Before we go on to the applications fully, two things really. I intend, because this could be quite a long meeting, to have a comfort break about 7:20, depending on how the meeting goes and how the applications go. And secondly, could I bring forward with your consent item number 8? And the reason I'm bringing that forward is that it's an item that the applicant has asked to be deferred. And if I read what they have said, having considered the matters in the late information for the Northern Routes planning application, we as the applicants would like to request the application deferred by planning committee at the meeting tonight, so that these matters can be considered further before a decision is taken. Are members happy and mindful to defer that? Okay, thank you. The first item on the agenda is public toilets, King George the 5th playing fields, Wade Road, Upper Mill. And initially, could I ask the officers to outline the application?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, yes, item number 6, this is the former public toilets at King George the 5th playing fields on Wade Row in Upper Mill. So this site is located within the playing fields themselves, which are also known as Upper Mill Park, the location of which is shown on the slide here, adjacent to Wade Row at the northern end of the park. It does relate, as the description suggests, to an existing building, which is a small detached building within the red line boundary there at the northernmost boundary of the park. And it is located within Upper Mill Conservation Area and close by to the River Tame. So the application itself, I'll just put the aerial view on here for some wider context with a photograph of the building. But the application itself is for the change of use of this building to a cafe with ancillary takeaway, and also includes within it the provision of a public toilet facility, external alterations to the building, including the replacement of the existing roof with a green roof, a single-storey, predominantly glazed extension, and a bin store. So the application's brought to committee on the grounds that the site is owned by the council, and a significant number of representations has been received, which are summarised within your report pack. So the background of the application and the building in particular, it was granted planning permission in November of 1999 and is understood to have been vacant since 2018 when the toilet facilities were closed. In terms of its siting, it is located just outside the designated district centre, and policy 16 in our local plan is therefore engaged, which does support the principle of small local shops. I emphasise the word shops because they now fall within the same use class as a cafe. So in short, the principle is supported by policy 16. If I just provide some plans for some more context here. So the proposal would result in the loss of approximately 52 square metres of public open space, and that impact therefore engages our Local Plan Policy 23. That policy seeks to offer protection to existing open spaces, but it does support loss where the proposal comprises small-scale development which is ancillary or complementary to the open space function of the site, and that the quality and character of the site is maintained. So in this case, the benefits associated with the proposal, which notably include the reuse of the vacant building and the provision of a new public toilet facility, in Office's view, would complement the open space function of the park, and is not considered to conflict with the aims and objectives, the wider aims and objectives of Policy 23. So as such, in principle, the development in land use terms is considered to be acceptable. So the site is, as I mentioned, it is located within the conservation area, and therefore we've got to be mindful of the impact in heritage terms. The totality of all of the impact of the proposals is considered to represent what's defined as less than substantial harm, and that is a term that's used in the National Planning Policy Framework. So the link to that is through our Local Plan Policy 24. The National Planning Policy Framework allows less than substantial harm to be approved where the public benefits outweigh the extent of any harm caused. So we have, the scheme has evolved since it was originally submitted, and in consultation and seeking advice from our conservation officer, as officers, despite the fact it is a contemporary addition to the building, the public benefits are considered to outweigh the less than substantial harm caused to the conservation area. So in terms of residential amenity, it is firstly acknowledged that the site is in close proximity to some residential properties, and those nearest ones are on Hopkinson Close and Wade Row. And it is considered that the alterations to the building and the provision of the proposed bin store would not have any significant impact on the occupiers of those properties that would justify refusing the application. However, that does come with some restrictions. So we have consulted with environmental health colleagues, and as a result, we have conditions that have been recommended, which, amongst other things, seek to restrict the opening times and the delivery times. So you'll see from the report that those hours are suggested at opening hours restricted to between 9 AM and 7 PM, and deliveries restricted so they can't take place before 8 AM on Monday to Saturday, and not before 9 AM on Sundays and bank holidays. In terms of highway impacts, obviously we've consulted with the highway engineer, and the provision of collapsible bollards have been recommended at the park entrance from Wade Row. The purpose of that is to prevent vehicles parking and obstructing the access, but those would facilitate the deliveries when they are required. In terms of ecology and trees, the site does form part of a wider green corridor and link, but it is considered that the proposal is small scale and would have no material impact on the function of the green corridor and link. And importantly, we have consulted with the Greater Manchester Ecology Unit, who have not raised any objections. The proposal would, however, result in the loss of 2 trees, but through negotiations we would be requiring those to be replaced with 6 trees on the site, and we have consulted with the Council's arboriculturalist, the tree officer, about that, and they've raised no impact, which is partly informed by the fact the trees to be lost, which are a rowan and cherry tree, are categorised as category C, which essentially means they're of low quality and value. So the recommendation is subject to the imposition of the conditions suggested in the report, which include, amongst other things, restricting the delivery times, the opening times, requiring the replacement trees and securing the public toilet facility, the proposal is considered acceptable and is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Woodbine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify 2 points. The first one is when we talk about the loss of open space, does the cafe itself fit within the footprint of the current toilets, and is it just the outdoor seating area which is bigger than the current footprint? And because obviously on that plan there you can see there's the space for 6 trees, and then it's all presumably green space around the toilets and the outdoor seating. And the second question is, could there be 2 public toilets rather than just one for men and women rather than a unisex toilet? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Yeah, thank you. So, as I set out in the introduction, as shown on the plan there, the proposal does result in incursion into the park, approximately 52 square metres. And as I alluded to in the introduction, Policy 23, which aims to protect open space, it does have certain exemptions where it's a complementary ancillary function to the park. So there is an incursion into the park, but it is considered to comply with the aims and objectives of our local plan policy, which is of course the relevant test. In terms of the toilet facilities, there is proposed a customer toilet in addition to the public toilet facility. So there's 2 toilets in total, 1 public, 1 for customers.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Reid.
Just to answer the question a bit more clearly, because I can see Councillor Woodbine, you're still unsure. We can't, at this point in time, the applicant has put forward their proposal for that proposal, just 1 customer toilet, 1 public toilet. We cannot demand that they put 2 public toilets in that way. Obviously, that would be a basis for whether you think that's a reason for refusal or not.
Is there any further? Councillor Alan Darby.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, and I did find this in the reports when I went and looked, there's nothing in the report here that says the conservation officer was actually okay with the final design. I do think it would be really helpful if information like that was in the report. It sort of says that the conservation officer was consulted and lists the changes, but it was only when I went to the reports online that it actually says the conservation officer was happy with those changes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Councillor Alan Downey. Mr. Lee, do you want to comment?
Yes, so we obviously covered in the report a summary of the consultation exercise, which involves consulting with the conservation officer. With the conservation officer looking at it very squarely on heritage grounds, the role of the local planning authority is slightly wider because we're looking at the wider public benefits. So what we're saying here is that there is some harm to the conservation area by virtue of what's being proposed in a contemporary edition. But in a wider planning assessment, what we're saying is the public benefits are considered to outweigh what we're classifying as less than substantial harm to the conservation area.
Councillor Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask, please, the rest of the playing fields are occasionally used for events, and obviously events applications have to be submitted to Oldham Council. I was just wondering if this application were successful and the business established on site, would that affect in any way Oldham Council assesses events applications or the arrangements that would need to be made? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that would be a planning matter for us, but just to answer the question, as far as I'm aware, I can't see why it would. Obviously, there might be a slightly reduced area for any such event, but there's still plenty of space to hold an event on the playing field, so I don't see how it would affect the council's policy in that respect. But it's not a planning matter for tonight.
Councillor Gloucester.
Thank you, Chair. As there is only 1 toilet facility, I understand that there's 1 inside for customers, Will that be operating at the same hours as the cafe? I'm assuming it will. I just want clarification on that. And also, is that one facility going to be accessible at all?
Okay, yeah, so we do have, I think it's condition number 9 on the recommendation, which says that the toilet, as indicated on the submitted plan, should be made available for general public use at all times that the business is open to the public between the operating hours 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. Monday to Sunday, including bank holidays. So I hope that answers that question. Whether it is accessible may well be a question for the applicant.
I think it's in the report, page 10. Top of page 10. The top of page 10.
Okay. Yes, sorry. Yes, it does clarify this will be a disabled toilet which will be made available and be managed by the applicant while the business is open to customers. So it is in the report at the top of page 10.
Thank you. Councillor Sergeant.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just go back to the previous slide with the floor plans? Just like clarification. So is the purple dotted line the current section of where the building is and the one outside it proposed? Can you just clarify that, please?
Sorry. Right, this drawing here. Yeah, so the existing building is obviously on the footprint at the northernmost part of the site. There is an annotation on that drawing, which unfortunately I can't, from this plan, zoom in enough on it to read it. But that clearly shows the extent of the application in terms of the extension proposed to that building. I can't quite read the annotation. I can't read the annotation, sorry.
Yeah, can you
So-
point it to show what's the original building and what's the...
So Martin, you know,
If you could just point it out on the plan there.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we go back, show you the photos, that might just help provide some context here as well. So this is the existing building from the front, and from the rear elevation that shows the location of the trees which would be taken out as well, and they're shown on that drawing. The trees to be removed are shown with the purple circles, and that projecting front elevation on the photograph is this section here. And obviously, as I said, the extension that's proposed is shown at the rear with the outline in black.
I've just put up the plan separately as well. I can see that the purple line, it's saying, the purple line indicates flat roof overhang above.
Is there any further questions still? Councillor Alan-Darnay.
Thank you. With regards to the residential amenity, there's no sort of reference in the report to impact on the users of the park. And one of the things I'm concerned about is you've introduced a large glass elevation into a park area, which is used for kids to play football, etc. And there's no reference to that in the report. That would seem to me to be counting against residential amenity. Can you give some clarification on why that doesn't seem to be the case from the report?
Okay, so when we're looking at residential amenity, obviously that's quite a wide-ranging subject matter. So primarily, we're looking at the impact of the proposal in terms of its physical form and the activities associated with its use on those living nearby. So obviously the closest properties on Wade Rowan, Hopkinson Close, I think it was, that's the primary part of that assessment. In terms of the wider use of the park, that kind of strays into an overlap with our policy 23, which protects the use of protects the open space, which obviously has an amenity function. And as I said earlier in the introduction, the proposal is small scale and ancillary and complementary to the wider function of the park. So it's acceptable in terms of assessment against both Policy 9, which is our general amenity policy, and Policy 23.
Councillor Landon.
It didn't really seem to answer the question, because it's the materials that are being used that are then creating a potential issue for the users of the park.
Okay, so as I understood, your question was twofold in terms of shouldn't the impact on the user of the park be considered a residential amenity, but what Martin is explaining is that residential amenity only applies to actual homes nearby, not just the users of the park. In terms of whether the materials used would impact on the users of the park, I'm struggling to understand what exactly you're concerned about there in terms of how a glass frontage would in any way harm the amenity of users of the park.
I mean, I know because I did it myself when I was growing up in that park. I played football right there, and what you've got is a bunch of kids who are going to go, oh, I can't really play football there anymore. Which I know is a minor, relatively minor thing, but it does seem like you're impacting on the amenity of the people who are using it, and I don't know, if it wasn't made out of glass, that wouldn't happen, or if there was screening, that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, I understand what you mean now, sorry. So I think what we'd say in that is obviously there's still a large area of open space still remaining, and that's been part of the consideration, as Martin said, under Policy 23. So there is still plenty of space for a kickabout, if you like, away from the building. Obviously the seating and what have you, it will be obvious to any user that there are people there, that there is a facility there. You need to keep away from it in terms of which direction you're kicking a ball or throwing a ball and what have you. Obviously accidents do happen, I appreciate that, and I'm sure the operators of the proposed facility would realise that too. But I don't think overall it doesn't undermine the amenity of the park in terms of as a public recreation space. But I do understand what you're saying now.
Okay, I don't see anybody wanting to ask any more questions. If we could then move on to speakers, and we have an objector in the first instance, and that's Francis Haywood. What will happen is that you're given 3 minutes to speak. Just short of the 3 minutes, you'll be told that you have to conclude, and that's the same with all speakers except councillors. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. King George playing field is a space that acts as a welcome green buffer against the busy high street of Upper Mill. By allowing a 40-seater glass box cafe to operate in this setting effectively brings the high street into the park and will damage the conservation area. With this design, the field and its setting will be changed forever. From the outset of the site, it's been a major issue of its scale. Taking a modest toilet building of 33 square metres and developing it into an 85 square metre cafe will affect the whole of the community that use this field. The freedom that this field offers will be curtailed by the domination of a cafe. Its ancillary needs, such as the vehicle turning head, will bring in vehicles into the site, is also a major concern, as is the bin store area. It's in a position that's very close to the domestic houses. The size, although they say it's been altered, the size of the bin storage area hasn't been altered, only the bins have been altered. This shows an unwillingness on the part of the applicant to consider the needs of residents. At one point, that bin store is just 6 metres away from the habitable windows of a house. This will cause a significant harm to those residents. The designer has not yet shown how the security of the building will be implemented. Security lighting is also a concern. This application has highlighted the many problems of lack of public toilets. These toilets should never have been closed. There's only one public toilet to be provided in this scheme. There are 7 toilets in that building. This is not a fair trade-off, and the scheme falls short. if only the designer had the understanding of what people need. We ask that the scheme provide 3 toilets, 1 male, 1 female and 1 disabled accessible. Now we recognise that the style is subjective, but we feel that this scheme fails to demonstrate a balanced approach. We've been alarmed by the recent revision of the Conservation Officer's comments. Twice it was proposed that the officer was strongly against it, but now that's been abandoned.
30 seconds.
I speak on behalf of the many objectors and hope that you may adjourn this decision on the development until the applicant is able to configure the scheme with a minimum of 3 toilets. But if this committee is mindful to pass the application, could you please consider putting rigorous conditions on it to include the safeguarding against any further expansion or contraventions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Haywood. Has anybody got any questions of Mrs Haywood? No? Councillor Allen-Darnay?
Sorry, and we've got a lot of applications tonight, so I'm going to keep everyone. You just said, and with no more explanation, security lighting is an issue. Could you explain what you meant by that, please?
Sorry. Yeah, we know that when lighting takes on during the night, it leaks into other areas, and we're just very aware that, you know, the lighting scheme needs to be sorted out now, so we know if it's done as a condition, we, as residents, we don't get any say in it. And we just would like to know what lighting is going to be there. Because clearly they're going to have to provide some kind of security for their own peace of mind. Also, we're worried about like the roller shutters and things like that. Will they become apparent later on? We need to know these things. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have any further questions. Councillor Lancaster?
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Can I ask, please, I know you said that you'd like 3 public toilets. If there were, say, I know this is theoretical, but if there were 2 public toilets, but the 2 had like disabled adaptability put in them, would that be an appropriate compromise in your mind?
Well, to be honest, no, because we all know we've all needed a toilet at some point, haven't we? And we can't predict when that's going to be. But the thing is, there's people who urgently need a toilet, and I don't see 3 as an unreasonable amount of toilets considering that the area already holds 7, and I know it's a bank of toilets that have not been used for a long time, but no, I think 3 is a fair number. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think there's any further questions. If I can now ask Mark Jones, who's going to speak for the applicant, and the same conditions apply. Mr Jones.
Grandpa Greens is one of Oldham's recent success stories. The cafe and ice cream parlour in Diggle is a popular tourist and visitor destination. The business is constantly evolving with new opportunities being sought. Oldham Council chose Grandpa Greens as the preferred bidder to take over the former public toilets within Upper Mill Park, with a plan to convert and extend the building to become a cafe with an ancillary take-out facility for coffees, ice creams and sandwiches. Positive dialogue has taken place with council officers throughout the planning application process. The scheme seeks to retain the stone buildings, convert into a food preparation area and sales kiosk. A fully glazed extension with retractable roof will accommodate seating for up to 44 people. The building includes an accessible public toilet that is accessed from the rear of the building. In addition, there will be an internal customer toilet. Both will be managed and maintained by Grandpa Greens. The public toilet will be open to members of the public during cafe opening hours and also during food preparation times. The toilet will be fitted with a radar key, allowing 24-hour access to people with disabilities and health conditions. The cafe will create at least 10 full and 5 part-time jobs. The scheme has been amended to take into account some concerns raised, including the removal of outside decking and reducing the size of the extension. The scheme results in the removal of the steeply pitched roof and its replacement with a low-level green sedum roof that brings not only about aesthetic benefits, but ecological and environmental benefits to the wider community. The lightweight glazed extension allows light and views to pass through and so reduce its visual impact on the conservation area. The repurposing, extension and design improvements to the building results in a positive impact on the conservation area and park as a whole, with significant public benefits. The scheme will result in the loss of 2 small trees, and these will be replaced with 6 trees in line with council guidelines. Deliveries will be made via Wage Row entrance between the hours of 8 AM and 9 AM each day of the week. This can be controlled as all goods are delivered to a central ice cream manufacturing base in Oldham and distributed from there by small delivery vans. Management schemes for litter, deliveries, cooking odours, tree protection have been submitted and agreed with council officers. The scheme has been supported by Sadworth Parish Council as well as the Fields in Trust, with all rent being received being reinvested back into the park. It is requested that the scheme is supported by Council's Planning Committee in line with officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Jones. I wonder if you could address the issue that has been raised around security lighting in the building.
Yeah, there's no plan to put external security lights. What the plan is to have internal low-level lighting so the building has an ambient light. We'll have CCTV cameras facing the building, but there's no plan for external lighting.
Thank you. Councillor Woodbine.
Thanks, Mr Chairman. I was just going to ask a question and to contextualise it. The toilets closed 4 years ago, so we're in a situation now where most of the visitors to Upper Mill have become accustomed to not using a public toilet. There's one in a shop on the High Street which is paid for by the parish council, but most people don't plan to use a public toilet in Upper Mill now because there aren't any, apart from that one, which is not really very well known. So I was just wondering if the applicant would consider using the second toilet space as so not differentiating between a public toilet and a patron's toilet and just having 2 toilets that are for patrons and the public, considering most people visiting the cafe will probably end up buying products from you anyway. So there's not really a differentiation between the two because most people will probably buy from you when they're in the park. So I was wondering if that's an option.
Well, I'm obviously not the operator, I'm the agent, so I couldn't really speak on his behalf. What I will say is that the scheme has been designed carefully to accommodate an accessible public toilet, which allows access with the radar key, 24/7. Internally, the customer toilet is configured in such a way that access to that toilet is internally. So members of the public have to actually come inside the cafe to use the toilet and then leave. The likelihood they wouldn't actually be customers of Grandpa Greens, they'd just be there to use that internal public toilet. So that's why we're actually providing one accessible public toilet at the expense of Grandpa Greens.
Thank you. Is there any further Councillor Landani?
You talked before about having ambient lighting within the building. What hours are you talking about that being? Because you've also said that there's it's designed sort of sensitively to not impact on the conservation area, but having a lit up building late at night would seem to be quite visual.
It's ambient lighting, it's low level lighting, so it'll actually be on all the time through the night. But it won't be glaring spotlights or security lights, it'll actually be internal lighting within the building, just to give it that presence that it's actually there.
Councillor Woodbine.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Before the meeting, somebody told me that in Diggle, at the other Grandpa Green site, there's a key to use the toilet, and I was just wondering what the system will be for this toilet. Will it be open to the public in the sense that they can just walk into the toilet, or will there be like a key where you have to go in and ask for the key and then use the toilet, and then, people are waiting to use the toilet? I'm just wondering what the system will be.
Well, it has to be publicly accessible, so there'll be no key. It'll be there open during opening hours of the cafe. And indeed what we're saying is that during the preparation time, so say for example people are going into work at 8 in the morning, they'll open up the actual kind of toilet an hour earlier than what's actually prescribed in the planning conditions. But conversely, if the cafe in the winter months will be only open 9 till 5, then the public toilet will only be open 9 till 5. So there's kind of a balance to be struck.
Is there any further questions at all? No. If not, could I ask Councillor Sheldon to address the meeting?
Thank you, Councillor Dean, Chairman of the meeting, and thank you, Committee, for your time this evening. King George V playing fields, also known as Upper Mill Park, is split into 3 areas consisting of a formal garden area surrounding a war memorial, a children's play area with swings and slides, etc., and an open field surrounded by trees and unused stone toilet facility. This was closed quite a few years ago now. The open field is commonly and affectionately referred to as the back meadow. The field is edged by the River Tame and numerous stone-built cottages, some with unique presence and character. This field, although relatively small in size, is used by many local people and visitors to the area, as it is well known tourist spot within the Upper Mill Conservation Area. The field is well used by families using the play area, people running, jogging, children's ball games, dog walkers, and formal events such as local fairs, inflatable slides and bouncy castles. The current toilet building is situated on an elevated corner of the field by Wadrow Cottages and was closed by the council after being misused and cost-saving exercises by the borough. Soon after the facility was closed, the ward councillors, and I was one at the time, and the Oldham officers met in Upper Mill Library to decide a plan of action for this building. The idea was first put forward to ask businesses to take on board the upkeep of the toilet facility and open and close these on a daily basis. It was expected that to make the situation viable, the building may need to be extended and that possibly a large kiosk type business selling refreshments, ice creams, coffees would be suitable. This application is a larger scale than I first imagined, but I understand from the initial application the overall footprint has been reduced and the decked area removed. This has the approval of the residents group, as the building will be less domineering on this field. There are several outstanding concerns, such as the bin storage, etc., which can be addressed over time and as the business settles into these new surroundings. The overwhelming objection to the current plan is the single public toilet facility. The park, although relatively small, attracts on a fine sunny day several hundred children and adults. At an organised event, this can rise to several thousand people. One toilet is simply inadequate and was not the intention of this council of which I was part when the idea was first put forward. I would suggest a minimum of 3 toilets, a ladies, a gents and a disabled. This, I believe, is essential for the public to use at any park. It is a basic requirement. I am sure that this business will make a success of this venture in Upper Mill Park and will provide many jobs in the future. But we must make sure that we get the facility we intended to provide to the residents and visitors to Upper Mill. It is tonight where I ask members of this committee to consider this request. As the ward councillor for Upper Mill and supporting residents' concerns, I ask for your support to defer this application or refuse it in its current form. I am sure that the applicant wishes to do everything to make this a great asset for Upper Mill, but give back an adequate service which the ward councillors and officers first set out to provide. Thank you.
Are there any questions of Councillor Sheldon? Councillor Surgeon?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Sheldon. Can I ask, obviously you're representing the residents who are objecting to this. Are they mainly objecting to the number of toilets available, or is it the size of the planning of the building. Exactly, can you just clarify exactly what they're objecting to in terms of priorities? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Serjan. Yes, I'll answer that. And it is the number of WC toilet facilities. Many women don't like going into a unisex toilet after a man, etc. There's all funny things about toilets which I think people will understand. I understand that the owners of the cafe will regularly check it and clean it, but I do think that we need 3 separate toilets, because the last thing we want is people queuing up and standing outside waiting to get in a toilet. And the numbers I've described, 1 toilet is simply not sufficient.
Councillor Woodbine.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, this is a bit contradictory to the questions I've asked previously, but I just want to get a wider understanding. If a second, I think 3 is probably not likely, even if we do defer it, but if a second toilet was provided and they were both disabled, what do they call it, disability accessible or whatever the term is.
Accessible toilet.
Accessible toilets, thank you, Councillor Amdani. That would surely increase the footprint even further. So considering one of the big objections is the size of the footprint and the impingement on the field, would then having a second toilet not be counterproductive?
I've got to say that tonight you as the planning committee are making a decision on whether or not this goes ahead. If it goes ahead in its current form, we're going to end up with 1 toilet, and that is not enough for the number. I lived in Upper Mill for 17 years. I know how the park is used and how many people are there. I provided a public toilet in one of my shops and it's still there. I don't own the shop anymore now. And the number of people, if your child is there on Upper Mill Park and says, I want a wee, they don't want to run across the road to the little shop. They don't want to run up to the Civic Hall. They need that toilet immediately. And I think it was said earlier on that many people have lived without a public toilet in Upper Mill Park for 4 years now, or whatever it is. Many people do not use Upper Mill Park because there isn't a facility there. So the argument is, on making this decision, we need to make sure there's enough. The whole purpose, the whole exercise when we first set it off was to keep the toilets. There were 7. And to reduce that to 1 is just not acceptable.
Is there any more questions of yes, Councillor Gloucester?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested, you talk about events being held there, Councillor Sheldon, and you obviously mentioned quite large numbers. How often is the park actually used for those types of activities? Is it an annual thing or is it a quarterly thing? Or I'm just interested to know. I have got another question though after that as well.
Yeah, we've got an event coming up. Most people call it the Bouncy Castle, and they've got inflatables where children can run up and down slides. It tends to be at the Easter holidays, the summer holidays, when the children are not in school. We also had recently the Yorkshire Day Fair, where there's stalls all around the park, and obviously depending on the weather, the number of visitors do vary. On the Whit Friday event, which is very busy in Upper Mill, the organisers do actually pay for additional toilets, those mobile toilets that they put in the park. But on a general day-to-day business, I am saying tonight that I think 3 toilets is necessary just for a nice summer's afternoon when there's loads of people there. They might be having a picnic, they might be watching the children on the swings. So I think it's down to the committee to say, yes, we're going to give this person or the applicant the opportunity to put this cafe in Upper Mill, make a lot of money out of it, pay lots of wages, but we do want something back. And Mr. Lee said several times at the beginning, the public benefit. If we don't get the 3 toilets that I'm asking for, we have no public benefit. There's no other public benefit. You can get a coffee at Saint's Cafe anywhere on High Street. Thank you.
Councillor Gloucester, you want to?
Yeah, I think I can ask it in the general discussion. Thank you.
Is there any further questions? No? Okay, if there's no further questions, if I could open the application out to general debate. Councillor Gloucester.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually interested in what the applicant said very early on in his speech about they were chosen to take over the running of the public toilet facilities. So I'm not a toilet expert. We have a park with 1 toilet in, and it does cause problems. It's a key-held access toilet, but it does cause quite massive issues. But I do understand that the clientele might be different, as there's a bowling green on ours. However, I think that one statement of they were chosen to take over the running of the facility plus a cafe, I think it really does need looking at again, this application. The other issue I do have is there is absolutely no condition in this application that restricts any future expansion. I have absolutely nothing against Grandpa Green's. I love their ice cream. I don't attend the cafe, but you know, I understand they're an extremely viable business and they've brought a great deal to the economy of Oldham. However, having seen what has happened at their other premises, I do have issues in terms of no condition on future expansion. Thank you, Chair.
I think that condition would be, I'll bring Mr. Richardson, but I think that condition is almost impossible to enforce, because obviously if this facility is extended, they would have to come back to this committee to actually get approval for an extension to the building.
Yes, I'll take that point first while it's fresh in my mind. So yeah, as Councillor Dean says, that's essentially it, is that there's no reason to impose a condition, and bearing in mind that any condition we impose has to be justified and reasonable in planning terms. There is no reason to apply such a condition because any such extension would require a new planning application. So from that point of view, say it's not reasonable, it's not justified to put such a condition on. It's unduly restricting and predetermining what we might allow in the future. We might not allow anything, but we don't know because we haven't seen any proposals. So there's that. I think in terms of the issue around the toilets and how many could be provided and what have you, I think we have to bear in mind that, again, first of all, we're here to assess the application before us tonight, and the application has not proposed two public toilets, if we can phrase it that way, or 3 for that matter. One is still again on the current situation. We have 0 in the park right now, and without a proposal such as this, that will remain the case. The council has no plans at the moment to reopen that toilet block because of the challenges that that came across previously with those toilets. So there is a gain. If the council, the committee can't really ask the applicant to or to defer this application to go away and look at, can you provide more toilets, because that would be, as Councillor Woodvine alluded to earlier, if you have more toilets, you're ultimately then going to have to expand the expansion. So again, the scheme materially changes, it materially gets larger. You know, it's unreasonable for us to defer it on that, to ask the applicant to go and make such a big change. We have considered the application as officers, we've made the recommendation to you. It's for this committee tonight to make a decision on that, unless there are other matters that it is reasonable to defer it on. And then finally, in terms of some of your comments and queries, in terms of if I can phrase it as the contractual agreement, should we say, between the council as landowner and the applicant, that is not something that we can consider as part of the planning application. to clarify maybe some of the comments that were made or how they may have come across, as I understand it, just for information, it's not a case of the applicant was chosen to provide a new toilet, and as a result they can have a bit of a cafe from the. I appreciate that, but I think it's more the case of I'm not fully aware of the procedure because it's not something I've had to be involved with, but obviously there was a procurement process, an opportunity. Grandpa Greens put in a submission, and as part of that, the council would have required at Grandpa Greens that if successful at planning, they would have to provide a public toilet as part of it. That was part of the benefit, if you like, of leasing the building in that way. So I just want to clarify that in terms of, one, we can't consider that anyway in terms of the contractual agreement, but two, I don't think it was intended in the way that it may have come across the comment. It's not about they've been appointed a contract to provide a toilet. They've made an offer to take over the building and put it to a cafe and ice cream parlour use, and the council as landowners required that they provide a public toilet as part of that.
Councillor Landani.
Can I just clarify one more point? So you said it's actually, it would not be reasonable to defer to discuss with the applicant if there might be a possibility of supplying to facilities. Is that what you're saying to me?
I would feel that way in terms of, I say, there's a substantial change to the proposal in doing that. It's not just a case of, within the existing structure, adding another toilet in. It's a case of there would be a wider expansion to the whole proposal, and I think that's getting to the point where we're being unreasonable in terms of the applicant doesn't have to. Anyway, you could make the request and they say no, please decide the application before you. But I think even notwithstanding that, I think it's in that scale of change, it's a bit unreasonable for us to do that, I think.
Councillor Landani and then Councillor Woodbine.
Thank you, Chair. This might be my misremembering or misunderstanding previously. I know we can't restrict what can go on in terms of future planning applications and haven't there been times where we've put in a restriction on permitted development, and so we could say, whilst we could, anything that would have to go to planning has to go to planning, but we wouldn't accept, like there's a restriction on what would be allowed under permitted development and something along those lines. And there is a second question.
So yes, there is such a proposal. I will defer to my colleague in terms of whether we consider there's any risk of any permitted development rights being in a situation.
Yeah, we do have to be very careful when we're suggesting removing permitted development rights. In a completely different context, we've brought applications to committee before where we've previous decisions to include such conditions we've had to back down on as a local authority. They are a national grant of planning permission, so to remove such a right, there would have to be a very, very strong case for doing so. However, it's worth bearing in mind as well the size of the site, which is contained within the red line plan. So any activities that could occur under permitted development rights would be contained within that red edge. So the red edge is a physical limitation. If that offers any comfort, sometimes you have a building with a significant curtilage where there may be more, or there would be more opportunities for using permitted development rights. But here it's very constrained anyway because of the site.
If I may just to add, check with Martin that I've got my facts right here, but in the conservation area anyway,
More restricted.
some of the permitted development rights are removed anyway because it's a conservation area.
Just to sort of expand out the question then a bit. So on the original application there was a decking area which has been removed as one of the, and there have been elements where the applicant has adjusted this in response to comments, so thank you. But would something like that be allowed under permitted development? And if it's been withdrawn, then that would seem to be a reasonable argument that restricting permitted development would make sense.
I mean, permitted development rights are very wide-ranging and constantly changing, and no one professes to know them inside out. So there are tighter restrictions for when they are conservation areas. But in this case, I mean, I'm looking at Peter for a backup on this, but because the council owns the site, there's also a degree of control through that route as well, which I don't know would offer some comfort. But again, the extent of any provision under permitted development, particularly on the southwestern side of the site, is extremely limited in any case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've written a speech, so you'll have to bear with me. I would like to start by acknowledging the objections which I have sympathy with. However, we do need to be realistic. The council do not want to reopen the public toilets, and the police support this decision due to the levels of inappropriate activity and antisocial behaviour, which I won't list in case there are children watching this meeting. Therefore, the only way to achieve public toilet provision is by approving the application. The revenue raised from the lease will fund maintenance of the field, and I believe the park will be better for the investment and the entire village will benefit. Having the presence of the ice cream parlour in the park, in my opinion, will deter any antisocial behaviour. Also, as the applicant is a Saddleworth man, I know he will be welcome and can't read my own handwriting there. Can you read that? No, it's just a squiggle. I think he will welcome, and it could possibly say work, with myself should any complaints about the cafe occur, and we will be able to address them with a community focus. Many families and individuals in the village and wider Saddleworth South Ward have expressed how they look forward to enjoying an ice cream in the park with their children, grandchildren and pets. Uppermill Village is a popular place to visit, with people coming regardless of this cafe. But I do genuinely believe that if we don't approve this, then something a lot worse will come along. Fields and Trust support the application, and it would be easier for me to let all of you vote this through without my input. However, I want to be pragmatic and do what is right for the residents of my ward, who I hope, given time, will see that this does not turn out to be as bad as it may seem. The petition I have not seen, and I do not know who has signed it or where they live. Many objections were whipped up, pardon the pun, in March. I don't know that you got that or not, but Grandpa Greens doesn't sell Mr. Whippy ice creams. But that was also against the plans for the nursery, and we're not considering the nursery today, so it's a little bit of confusion around that. Anyway, regardless of what I think, the plans are likely going to be approved by this committee anyway, but I hope my comments will have put some minds at ease.
Thank you. Councillor Landana.
It's just, sorry, with regards to what you were saying about the footprint would be increased if you went to 3 toilets, but if you made the 2 toilets equally publicly accessible, that doesn't change the footprint, doesn't it? Does it? And therefore you're getting greater public benefit, and what we're doing with this is offsetting kind of development in a conservation area versus public benefit. So that wouldn't have the issue that you were raising, but would potentially develop, give more back and help address that.
Yes, potentially. I mean, I think as the agent for the applicant has already outlined tonight, that access to that second toilet is through the cafe. So any person wanting to use it would have to come through the cafe. Whether that would be clear that it's for public use in that sense, again, there's a limitation in terms of that's obviously restricted to when the cafe's open as well. But obviously you still have the other one with a radar key in the evenings and what have you. So yes, conceivably that is the case. That could happen anyway. That could well be how the business chooses to operate and be kind and generous to the people of Saddleworth as they're using the park. Whether it's worthy enough of a reason, if you like, to either defer or to I'm not sure if you even could place a condition on that in that regard, because it's not something we can control in planning in that sense. But yeah, I can't argue with what you're saying. That is a possibility.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak? Councillor Sadie.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, my main concerns are the size of the scheme, but from the feedback, obviously, that we received from Councillor Sheldon, it seems that perhaps the public toilets are more of a priority. I mean, I'm just worried that, obviously, in the grand scheme of things, having a scheme like this on this large scale will obviously impact the level of greenery that's remaining, and potentially in the future, like Councillor Gloucester suggested, it might mean further expansion, which means, again, loss of greenery, but obviously we can't predict the future. But based on the feedback I think we've received tonight, I think I'll move to approve this proposal and just take it from there, really. Thank you.
It's been moved to approve. Was that seconded?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just remind members there are obviously amended conditions as well.
So you're happy to approve, move and second with the amended conditions attached to the application? Yeah. Has anybody got any comments before we go to the vote? Okay. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour of approval, please show. Thank you. All those against? And 2 against. Thank you very much. So the application is approved. If we could now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is an application for Hilltop Farm, Heels Green, and it's the erection of an indoor menage extending 35 metres by 25 metres. And I will ask the officer to introduce the scheme.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, item number 7, this relates to Hilltop Farm on Heels Green in Chadderton. And this is a site that's located on the southern side of Heights Lane, to the east of its junction with Heels Green. So I'll just show you on the site location plan where that is. That's the red line indicates the application site. The blue line on this particular drawing indicates the extent of land owned by the same applicant, and you'll hear shortly that the activities taking place within the blue line are relevant in terms of the assessment of the application to some extent. And in order to provide some context, there's an aerial view here and a slightly different perspective on the site here. So the application itself is being referred to Planning Committee under the discretion of the Head of Planning on the basis of the size of the proposal, its greenbelt location, and the level of public interest that's been received to the proposals. So the site itself covers an area of approximately 875 square metres, and it comprises a area of open grassland bounded by a fence and a substantial hedgerow, particularly along the Heights Lane boundary. Adjacent to the site, which you can see from the aerial image quite clearly here, there's amongst other things, there's a horse exercise area with pasture, there are stables and an outdoor menage immediately adjacent to the site that form part of the overall facility. So this particular application proposes the erection of a building on the site which measures measures 35 metres in length and 25 metres in width. So it is a large building, and it would attain a height of 6.8 metres to the roof ridge of the shallow pitched roof you can see on the screen here. In terms of its construction and appearance, it would be constructed with fibre cement roof sheets, and the external facing walls would be provided in predominantly in Yorkshire timber boarding. So as I mentioned very briefly in the introduction, the site is located in the Greenbelt, and it forms part of a wider agricultural holding, which is essentially diversified into equestrian type uses, supporting livery, schooling and competitions as set out in the report. In terms of the Greenbelt assessment, this is the essential first step because it determines whether the principle of the proposal is acceptable. So as set out in the report, the erection of a building in the Greenbelt is inappropriate unless it meets one of a number of listed exceptions that are contained in the National Planning Policy Framework. So whilst the proposal would support the provision of a building to support outdoor sport or recreation uses that are essentially going on the rest of the site within the Blue Land, the proposal is clearly to provide indoor provision of such uses and therefore is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. So that's the essential starting point that we move forward from to establish whether the principle is acceptable. So the National Planning Policy Framework regards inappropriate development as being harmful by definition. However, where the totality of that harm is clearly outweighed by other considerations, that would essentially amount to very special circumstances. And when such circumstances exist, inappropriate development in the Greenbelt should be supported. So that's the policy framework around Greenbelt, and the relevant policy in our local plan is 22, and that links to the National Planning Policy Framework, which is the most recent guidance on Greenbelt. So in this particular case, the applicant has put forward a number of reasons why they believe that very special circumstances exist, and those are predominantly around that the site forms part of an existing sport and recreation based business, that there's demand for such uses from local special schools, that the building will provide safe facilities and promote inclusivity, that the development will enable the business to expand and promote diversity within the local community, and that the building will be built into the land, minimising its visual impact. So the extent of harm to the Greenbelt in this particular case is considered to be minimised by a number of factors. The most important attribute of the Greenbelt is its openness. And in this case, whilst the building, being of the size it is adjacent, it is well screened by the hedgerow you can see on the photograph here along Heights Lane, which offers a significant degree of screening from at least short distance views. And if I go back to the aerial images, you'll see that the building where it's proposed, which is just beyond the outdoor menage, you can see roughly in the centre of that photograph and the slightly paler colour. The impact is mitigated by the fact it's adjacent to a cluster of other buildings in the vicinity as well. So, having considered it very carefully in terms of the Greenbelt assessment, officers consider the extent of the harm which would result from the building on the openness and the visual character of the Greenbelt, and any other harm would be outweighed by the social and economic benefits of the scheme, which are considered to amount to the very special circumstances needed to justify what would otherwise be inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. So in short, the principle of the development is considered to be acceptable. However, there are, of course, other considerations as well. So the access to the site would be taken from an existing access from Heights Lane. There is no proposal to punch through any element of the hedgerow, for example, that would impact on its screening function. The highway engineers raised no objection to the proposals on highway grounds, including the arrangements about the access. There are residential properties in the vicinity, the closest being approximately 19 metres away on Crag Road. In terms of ecology, we've consulted with the Greater Manchester Ecology Unit, who have raised no objection on ecology grounds, subject to the inclusion of certain conditions, which include measures to protect the hedgerow, external lighting and the installation of bird boxes. And subject to the imposition of conditions contained on the report, the application, as you'll see, is recommended for approval. You will see from the information that's been provided that there's a minor there was a minor amendment suggested to the conditions, which include minor amendment to condition 7 to require the removal of the temporary fencing in order to protect the hedgerow. And it is also suggested that an additional condition is attached in the event the application is approved to restrict the use to no other uses in Class E of the use classes order, which stems from if that wasn't controlled, the building could be, if it's approved, could be put to other uses without planning permission, which could have a greater impact than what's been put before us with this particular use. So with those in mind, the application is recommended for approval, Chair.
Has anybody got any questions of the officers at this stage? Yes, Councillor Islam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, I have a few concerns regarding mentioned in the report, the highway safety. Now, I have been to Crag Lane and that area 3 times within the last week. I don't know how the highways engineer has not, there's no objections on the highway safety. Well, this is a single track road, and even when I was driving there, I had to park up on the side to let the other vehicles go through. Considering this is a business and it's going to attract a lot of business around the country, what impact it will have to the dog workers, cyclists, heavy-duty vehicles coming through. There's no mention of this on the highway side. I have a few more concerns as well I would like to raise later on if that's okay.
We are just questions to the officers just now, and I'm sure you can address those. Do you want to comment?
So the way I assessed this application was, and I did raise the questions with the applicant when I first got the consultation, was the development will directly replace what can already happen on that area of land. So it's already it can potentially already happen. It's just now going to be indoor rather than outdoor. The access is existing. The parking and turning areas are existing. So I didn't have, even if I had objected, the planning officers would have applied their planning balance and probably said to me, well, actually, you can't recommend refusal for highway safety reasons because nothing will really change. It's just a direct replacement.
Have we got any further questions at all at this time? Councillor Allen-Darnay.
Thank you. It's just with regards to the sort of style of the building, which I know it says in the report it's a sort of standard agricultural style. Given that it's in the green belt, is there an argument to say that it would be better, is a judgmental term, try not to use that, more appropriate perhaps if it was designed in a way which blended in rather than stood out, I mean, like that cement roof?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, with design, it's obviously a very subjective issue. There's no hiding from the fact that, having regard to the elevations, you can see on screen here, it's a very functional, basic building, albeit large. And when we're assessing the application, we have to do it in the context of which it's made and bearing in mind where it's to be located. So just looking at the aerial views, the cluster of existing buildings, which is perhaps clear on the photographs, are of similar size, elevation treatment. So it wouldn't necessarily essentially it would integrate with what's around it in built terms. Obviously, there's an issue in terms of assessing whether it's acceptable in the first place in the green belt. But in terms of from a design perspective, although it is functional, you know, it's not designed to be aesthetic. It's designed for a function. It is in keeping with the immediate surroundings.
Is there anybody else want to ask a question? If not, if we could go on to speakers, we've got an objector, Mr. David Kearney, is speaking on behalf of the people that have objected. Mr. Kearney, you do have 3 minutes, and you'll be told near the end of them.
Okay, it's Daniel, not David. Okay, I'm here to speak on behalf of local residents, all of whom live in close proximity to the proposed development. We wish to object to the application for an indoor menage on greenbelt land for the following reasons. Firstly, lack of consideration of its siting, scale, design and materials. The openness of the proposed location is an intrinsic part of the character of the Greenbelt corridor which surrounds Heels Green. The fact that the building may be partially screened by a hedgerow does not diminish its harm to the character of the area, especially as this hedge is deciduous and sheds its leaves in the autumn. The size of the building is disproportionately large. It will be higher and have a much larger footprint than any neighbouring property. The building has not been designed to be inconspicuous or to blend into its surroundings. The external appearance of the building is designed to look like a modern agricultural building with concrete panels, cement roof sheets and a large roller shutter door. Yet the location of the building is a considerable distance from all other existing outdoor farm buildings and is located at the furthest possible point from these in an open field. It is not nearby as suggested in the planning officer's report. Secondly, inadequate land drainage. It is clear that drainage matters have not been fully researched. During wet weather, the field where the development is proposed acts as a soakaway from the land and road above. The tanks at the gable end of the building are not an adequate alternative as they are not large enough to capture all the runoff surface water, which would exacerbate the flood problems that already exist. Thirdly, highways. Despite the applicant's claim that this development is unlikely to result in additional vehicular movement, we do not think that serious consideration has been given to the fact that an increase in clientele could also lead to an increase in traffic. This would impact drivers who already use the steep, narrow access roads to access their properties and could be hazardous for pedestrians as there are no pavements. 4. The very special circumstances, as outlined in the report, do not apply in this case. As the existing outbuildings are no longer required for farming purposes and are already present, the business would be able to expand by repurposing
30 seconds.
the use of the shed and with similar size to the proposed development as a useful form of farm diversification. This would also meet the safety and inclusion criteria during poor weather conditions for vulnerable clients.
Has anybody got any questions of Mr. Kearney? No? Okay, I then can move on to Mr. Chris Cowie, who is speaking as the agent for the applicant.
Thank you. Hilltop Farm is an equestrian riding centre, school located in the north of Chadderton. The riding centre provides livery, full and part DIY, schooling, competitions, holiday livery to the local community. This is a genuine application which is wholly compliant with planning policy and is designed and required to meet the needs of both the applicant's business and the local area. I have reviewed the planning objections, the majority of which hold little planning merit. The core principle of the proposal is compliant with Oldham Borough Council's core strategy, Policy 16, permitting new services and facilities. Policy 23, encouraging increased physical activity and exercise. Open space essential to health and well-being whilst contributing to social and community cohesion. The more recent National Planning Policy Framework 2021 includes paragraph 149, allowing for the provision of appropriate facilities for outdoor sport and recreation. such as this. This has been acknowledged to be policy compliant by the planning officer in a report which recommends approval. Furthermore, the applicant has demonstrated fundamental need for such an indoor riding arena through the demand for riding lessons from local schools, which support students with additional needs, and from a lack of existing facilities within the local planning authority, some of which are due to be withdrawn and cease to exist. Paragraph 11 of the NPPF confirms local plans should promote sustainable development proposals that seek to meet the needs of the local areas such as this. Paragraph 20 further promotes community facilities such as health and education. The building is of a similar design to any modern agricultural building, thus being in keeping with the local area, but also designed specifically for the purpose it is intended for. Noise and light can be contained within the building, discharging any concerns of harm to the amenity of local residents. The building will help to facilitate all year-round exercise and activities which may have otherwise been cancelled in unsafe extreme weather, which is becoming more and more common. I've also provided material considerations of similar applications. It has therefore been demonstrated that the application is policy compliant. The planning officer has reiterated this and as such recommends approval. We therefore respectfully request that the planning committee grants this application accordingly. Thank you for your time.
Has anybody got any questions of Mr. Cowie? Councillor Landani.
Thank you. In the special circumstances cited, one of the points is that the building will promote diversity and encourage clients from mixed cultural backgrounds. And I didn't see how a building would do that. Could you explain that to me, please?
It basically facilitates the existing run of the business. So at the moment, the riding school has mixed cultural clients. At the moment, as I mentioned, there's cancellations in extreme weather. People don't want to come out. They like to visit the site regularly and get involved. And that's what the building will help facilitate.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going from the question from Councillor Hamdani, special circumstances, mixed cultural background, they haven't provided any evidence to suggest what sort of research they've done for getting the mixed cultural background. And sometimes the application I see these, it does look nice, and it does look it makes a nice writing on the application, but is there any evidence to suggest that they will be doing this and they've done some research on this?
Again, the applicant's clientele have mixed cultural backgrounds. It's not designed, the building is not designed to bring in additional clientele, it's to serve the existing clientele.
Is there any? Yes.
Thanks, Chair. Just going back on the diversity issue, we know there's many inequalities there already. I'm not from that area, but my daughters go to St Matthew's, so we've got friends and family who live around that area. So I would be quite interested in how you would meet that diversity issue. We've got neighbouring wards, and I know horse riding is not cheap. So how would you subsidise those issues? And another thing, may I mention, Chair, if I'm allowed, about special circumstances. You say that that there's a demand, including, you know, for special needs schools or special schools. Has any consideration been made with the likes of maybe Kingfisher, who provide a lot of these you know, special needs facilities and etc. I'd be interested to know what you think on that, what your comments on that is. Thank you.
Yeah, so as part of the special circumstances, we'd submitted to the council a number of different letters of support. This one here is for a primary academy. We've got a further one here This is Springbroad project. This operates up to from 9 years, year 9 up to year 14, supporting with a range of additional needs. So it really is a business, although I can't emphasise enough that this is just for a building to help support the business, but it's a business that's open and happy to help anybody who's interested in horse riding or wants to get interested in horse riding for basically providing a service. You know, she's open to looking at it, the applicant, and really there will be no problem on that sort of side of things.
Is there any further questions before we go to Councillor Ali? Right. If we could go to Councillor Ali, who's the ward councillor who wants to speak on this issue.
Thank you, Chair. As a ward councillor for Chariton North Ward, I wish to speak to oppose the granting of planning permission for the introduction of indoor menage in the location suggested in the report presented to the committee this evening. It is apparent that the size of the proposed building will have a significant visual impact on the surrounding area. At 6.8 metres in height, at its apex, it is significantly above the height of the hedgerow, which runs Crag Road and Heights Lane. The impact will be more apparent during autumn and winter as the hedge sheds its leaves and the structure becomes more visible. Whilst it is recognised that there is need to encourage and promote sport and recreational activity, the proposed building is out of character given the nature and extent of open space greenbelt land which surrounds the proposed site. The proposed development does not represent the best use of available land, and if allowed to proceed, it may encourage the development of other inappropriate forms of industrial and commercial development, thus undermining the principle of establishing and maintaining the greenbelt land and preserving open space. This is an important aspect which needs to be emphasised in terms of preventing encroachment into the greenbelt land in the future. It is not clear there will be any significant gain in employment opportunities which may have helped to justify allowing such an impact in open greenbelt land. The proposal does not appear to offer any opportunity to sustain the rural economy. It is also apparent that there is a potentially significant impact on nearby residential properties, as the proposed structure seems to be within some 20 metres of properties on Crag Road and perhaps a little further away from properties at the bottom of Heights Lane. It is not clear to what extent noise and light pollution may impact on residents being in such close proximity to the proposed structure. One particular concern relates to traffic issues. The report suggests that there would be no increase in traffic. It is suggested, however, that there is an unmet demand for riding lessons and that there is also a demand for such facilities from local special schools. It is worth noting, however, that parking on site is somewhat limited, and any increase in traffic is likely to have a significant impact on the narrow single-track roads which surround part of the site. It is not difficult to visualize a degree of congestion resulting in the need for vehicles to back up in order to allow other vehicles to pass through the area. It is suggested, therefore, that highway safety may need to be given further consideration. Local ground conditions would suggest that part of the site sitting alongside properties on Crag Road will be subject to flooding. The nature and extent of this flooding becomes more apparent during periods of inclement weather, when rainwater runs across the road into the field where the proposed building is to be located. It is not clear to what extent the proposed structure might impact on this problem, thus making a potentially difficult problem much worse. The Greater Manchester Ecology Unit recommends the installation of bat and bird boxes with no works being undertaken during the bird breeding season. However, it is not clear what the wider impact might be on local wildlife, with badgers, foxes, etc. being potentially disturbed. Nor is it apparent whether just 2 birds stroke back boxes will be sufficient or where they might be located in order to remain undisturbed, allowing more acceptable nesting and breeding conditions. In addition, it is not clear whether any evidence is available which would demonstrate that this outdoor sporting facility is accessible to all, and whether there might be any scope for promoting inclusion and social cohesion by providing opportunities for disadvantaged groups to participate in horse riding activities. In the circumstances, it is not clear to what extent the community benefits associated with supporting a wider outdoor sporting and recreational activity outweigh the recognised harm to the green belt. It is evident that the proposed building is intrusive, that there is likely to be an increase in traffic on roads that are unable to cope with a significant increase in vehicular movement, a potential increase in the level of flooding during inclement weather, and also potential problems relating to the noise and light pollution. It seems likely that more work on this proposal needs to be undertaken before it can be allowed to proceed. A less intrusive project needs to be considered, perhaps on another part of the Hilltop farm site, and would therefore ask the committee to respectfully refuse permission for the current development. In summary, I would suggest that permission be refused on the grounds that the facility does not preserve the openness of the green belt, and that despite the fact that it is behind a mature hedge that is intrusive and would be seen to dominate that area of Hills Green to the detriment of the surrounding green space. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ali. Has anybody got any questions of Councillor Ali? No? If not, I'll throw the meeting open for consideration, debate. Councillor Cosgrove.
Yeah, it's just a query on there. Can you actually show what the footings of the building will be on that picture?
Yeah, so basically if you can see my cursor here, this is the location of the site, and just to cross-reference that with the site location plan, that red line here is the application site, and this square here is the adjacent outdoor menage here.
Right, so on your photographs, have you got any photographs of where it's actually going to be sited?
Yeah, so again, it'll be located in this location on this view. This photographs of the adjacent
so is it
outdoor
behind
menage.
that?
So it's beyond that photograph.
That's fine.
And it's obviously behind that hedge. Yeah, that's that's the full extent of the images we've got to support it. But the aerials probably give it the best context of where it's located, which will be here, behind the hedge on House Lane.
Does anybody, any Councillor Alandani?
Thank you, Chair. There seems to be something of a contradiction in some of the stuff that we've heard. In particular, so this is to help a business expand, but we can't adjust the roads because it's not going to increase the amount of stuff that's happening on the site. But yeah, we've heard that it's going to increase inclusivity by having more people being able to go there. But so it just doesn't make sense to me. Either this is allowing the site to be used more, and therefore we should take consideration of that, or it's not.
Is there anybody else wishes to speak? Councillor Gloucester.
Yeah, I can answer Councillor Al-Hamdani's question, because it's expanding the operational season of the business, because you cannot exercise horses in winter unless it's in an indoor school. The ground freezes, and even silica sand freezes, which is the normal surfacing of a menage outside. I've got a few things to say on this, to be honest. A normal size arena is 60 by 40. That wall is about 20 metres long. So that just gives you sort of a visual image of just how much smaller than a normal full-size dressage arena this building actually is. Due to being, if this was a normal, due to being on farmland, if this was a straightforward, normal agricultural building, I don't actually think we could refuse it because it would be down to the needs of the business. Now, for this, as I've just said, this will actually increase not the use of the business, but the viability through the winter months when it's very, very difficult to exercise horses. So those people that come in summer and go away and then they don't see them then till April, they will continue to use that facility throughout the winter months. Okay? I'm only telling you this because I know about horses. As far as I know, it's currently operating as a business. I think it's been there about 5 years from what I know. I remember going a very long time ago when the farm had actually just been bought. So I think it's about 7 years, and as far as I know, they've done a very good job on opening up the business and using it. I've said about the exercise in winter being very difficult, and it's about horse welfare as well. You know, if you think that a horse being stood in a 12 by 12 stable for the whole of the winter months because they cannot be exercised on frozen ground is good for the welfare, then we need to look at what's going on. I just think it is a new business. We should be supporting it. I am not one for building on Greenbelt. You absolutely know that. However, if this was an agricultural building, which they could apply for and without consent probably use it as an indoor riding school, they've tried to do the right thing by applying for consent. I did look into this and there was a prior application which there was a whole host of issues with. And as the officers are recommending approval, I think I would like to propose approval, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Surgeon, well, it's actually been moved approval. Is that seconded at all? Okay, it's not been seconded. If I could ask Councillor Surgeon, she wanted to.
Sorry. So, Martin, so is it just above the circle that says H on it? And so you see that basically from that circle onwards is Greenbelt land, or is that whole area Greenbelt land? Can you just clarify?
Yes, this whole area is Greenbelt. So
including the grey area.
Yes, the grey area here is actually the application site.
Yeah.
So beyond the circular area there, which I'm sure there's a certain term for that, but that's it was like an enclosure associated with the equine use. So the site is, as I've said, it's here, but this surrounding area is Greenbelt. Yeah.
Can I just follow up on that? So with the size of the building, would it go all the way up to the corner, or I think I spotted a house on there as well. So will that impact the house that's on the verge as well?
Sorry, the red line boundary there is the application site, and the proposed building sits within that site. That is the physical limitations of this proposal before you. And if I just get obviously that's the building that's proposed, that's the elevation, the roof and the roof plan. So it's sorry, yeah. So that's really all I can do to clarify it. It is here. We've obviously made reference to the adjacent nearest residential properties just off that plan to the eastern side. But the interface distance is such that it's not considered to raise any concerns from a residential amenity point of view, particularly given, I mean, one of the benefits of being enclosed is that the activities that could ordinarily take place on that site now are confined within a building. That's obviously one of the benefits.
Sorry, last follow up. Have you had any objections from the neighbouring properties, or has it been external people?
So yeah, we have had 17 objections made to the application. but we've also had 15 representations made in support. So the summary of both the objections and the letters of support are summarised at page 16 and 17. The objections, very broadly, are traffic, highways, greenbelt issues, noise, impact on residential amenity, harm to wildlife, drainage, and the size of the development and it being out of character. Whilst the letters of support are around the need for the facility, the indoor facilities required due to the weather, social benefits for adults and children, and enabling riding skills for children, and enabling disabled adults and children to access sport. So those are that's the nature of the representations that we've had.
Sorry. Yeah.
I couldn't itemise the 17 objections with the information I've got before me, unfortunately, but all I can say is we've had a total of 17 objections.
Councillor Islam and then Councillor Al-Landani.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What Councillor Surgeon was, I think, trying to make up, there's a house there right on the corner. Have they objected to the sunlight, or in icy conditions, you need the sun to melt, and would the height of it disturb, have issues melting their ice? Have they got any issues there?
Second, Martin. Because of data protection, we cannot individualise, say this individual's made a representation and what they've said. So all we can say is that in general, there's been this many objections. Yes, some were from neighbours, don't know exactly which off the top of my head, and we can't say that in this forum anyway. But all the objections are on the website, verbatim, but obviously not with personal details included.
Councillor Al-Landani.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer about the. I still think there is a contradiction there. It does feel like we're expanding a business, and yet we're not treating it as though we are. There was a question from the objector about the drainage, and I know it says that it hasn't been objected to, but it doesn't say that it's been actively endorsed. Is there a reasonable case to argue for a condition on the drainage that a more extensive plan should be provided before work goes forward, so that concern could be addressed?
Yeah, so as part of the application, you'll see from the report under other matters, we've got a section on drainage. It essentially just confirms the arrangements around surface water and how that would be managed and dealt with on site. And you'll see it's being proposed to use it in a sustainable way, about reusing it for the activities associated with the equine use of the site and the wider site. We have obviously consulted with our own drainage colleagues and the lead local flood authority on the application. They have not raised any objections, so we're relying on their technical expertise. Obviously, if committee members felt it appropriate to require other conditions to be added, that's something that obviously can be debated, but the technical advice from our own consultees is that they're happy with the scheme in terms of drainage.
Sorry.
I mean, just to add to that, I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Al-Landani. Again, just to clarify, in terms of when there's no objection, that's the crucial. It's not about whether they support it. Is there an objection that has to be overcome to make the development acceptable in planning terms? And there's not. So I think the starting point from my point of view would be the technical engineers who know drainage have seen what's proposed. They have not objected. Therefore, there's limited basis for a condition. Notwithstanding that, again, if there was a condition, on the basis that the applicant could just submit the same information and there'd be no objection from the drainage engineer, we would discharge the condition. We wouldn't be able to do anything else. So I think, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think there's any purpose to it at this point in time with this application.
Is there anybody else want to contribute? We're in an awkward position because it was moved but not seconded. From my point of view, I very rarely do a lead on these debates, but from my point of view, I find this development totally inappropriate in a greenbelt setting, and quite a significant building that will really stand out, you know, throughout that area, and actually make a great intrusion. And I personally feel that the special case hasn't been made to make an exception, and we are making an exception if we actually approve this from the Greenbelt. So I'm just saying that's my view, and I don't know whether anybody else wants to contribute going forward.
Can I, Chair, just say something? I think, with hindsight, we've been asked to approve it. However, with the conditions of those special circumstances, I just don't think that there's some of these points are adhered to as much as we'd like to, such as, and I think I've mentioned it before, about diversity. The other worry is about highways and safety. I've driven up those roads many a times. I've had to back up, and it's not a pleasant thing to do. And if the business is going to expand with horse riding, etc., I just can't see that flow. And that would be a worry for on the resident side, the safety. There's no footpaths. There's children living in those areas as well. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I concur with some of the views shared tonight. I genuinely don't think in my conscience I can support this proposal. So I'd like to move for refusal based on NPPF paragraph 138, part A, which is to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas, and C as well, to assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment.
Is that seconded? Councillor Islam seconded.
Okay, in the context, obviously, that the motion has been put forward and seconded, and obviously it's against officer recommendation, I'm obliged to have to say something, and Mr Evans may also as a legal representative here. But I think, first of all, touching upon, there's probably three issues I've picked up that have been the main points that have been part of the discussion. Taking the diversity point, first of all, I think, it's obviously we all want diversity in that sense. We want a business to be open to that. On behalf of the applicant, the agent has expressed that willingness to be open to diversity and to in fact encourage it, and their client group already is a mixture of cultural backgrounds. I think from the point of view of, again, the planning arguments and what have you, the bottom line is this is a business, and we cannot require any business to positively be diverse in that way other than what the law may require of them. Obviously, under the law, they cannot discriminate, and that's very important. But again, that's outside of planning. So I think we've just got to be a little bit careful on that point. I fully agree with the sentiments, but from a planning point of view, it's not a primary issue to this development. It is just a benefit that the applicant is expressing, that they will continue to promote diversity through what they do. I think in terms of the issues around the actual building and the size of it and the impact on the openness of the greenbelt, we've acknowledged that obviously from a greenbelt point of view, it does impact on the openness of the greenbelt, because there's no development there now. There will be a building, that is an impact. However, there are other factors that minimise the impact of that building, whether it be the hedgerow, whether it be the setting, and other factors. But crucially, Councillor Gloucester made a very good point earlier in terms of the fact that if this was an agricultural building of exactly the same design, there would be no basis in planning policy, nationally or local, to refuse permission for it, because agricultural in the greenbelt is a permitted, is a use that is allowed, and there's very limited restrictions on the design of such buildings. It could be a lot worse as an agricultural building in the greenbelt, in fact, from a design point of view. So from the point of view of the structure, yes, there is a new structure, but simply because of its use or proposed use as menage, something different, that isn't it? That's the only reason we're considering the fact there is a building and its design at this point in time. In terms of the issue of whether this will see an increase in use of the facility overall and therefore on highway impact, I think from what I'm gathering from what the applicant's agent has said and what have you, overall, yes, there will be more people using the facility, because when at the moment they can't use it because there's not this indoor menage, people will be able to use it. So overall, yes, I don't think we can't say that there won't be. However, does that mean that there will be a highways impact? Because the issue is with highways is always ultimately, at a given point in time, how many vehicles are using the highway. And this isn't expanding the capacity at any given time of the facility, it's expanding when it can operate. So I stand by what our highways engineer has said, in the sense of that there is no additional impact on the highway from this proposal as we as officers can see it, and that's why, along with the other factors, why we are recommending to you that this is approved rather than refused. Approved with the appropriate conditions, including the one that Mr. Lee referred to earlier as an additional one. So I feel obliged to set that out before you vote and be clear on that. Obviously, there are the implications of if you do refuse, about what the applicant may choose to do. I do accept that this is Greenbelt. It does involve very special circumstances, so it is always a subjective decision and a fine line, so it may not carry the same risks that other refusals may do, but we still have to be clear that the reasons for refusal are justifiable and defensible. And as I've outlined, I'm not convinced that the issue of diversity is enough of a reason for refusal. The issue of highways, likewise. And so all you'd be left with is that subjective call on, is this harmful to the Greenbelt to the extent that it outweighs the benefits?
And I think that was outlined.
Yes, Chair, I'd just like to remind members, if you are minded to refuse this against officer recommendation, you have to do so for valid planning reasons, and in the event of an appeal, you will be required to provide evidence to substantiate each of those reasons, because if not, there's a risk that the council will have costs awarded against us for unreasonable behaviour, because you're expected to justify all the reasons that you put forward for refusal.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the diversity thing, but because you were saying it's not sufficient, I wasn't arguing that that was a sufficient point. It should not be included as a very special circumstance in its favour, because there was no justification in what was said and no justification in the planning application that I've seen that it would encourage diversity. And on those grounds, I don't expect to see it there, and if it came up again, I would expect the planning department to challenge it, and if they can't justify why it's there, it should not appear as a very special circumstance.
It's been moved and seconded. Does anybody, any councillor, want to make any comments further before we go to the vote? Right, it's been moved and seconded that we refuse this. All those in favour of refusal, please show. That's 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those against? There's 2 people against. Thank you. So this application is refused. Thank you. What I'm suggesting now, we have a comfort break of between 5 and 10 minutes. If you could get back as soon as possible, please, that'd be helpful. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I think, are we all back, I think?
Martin's not back yet.
Sorry?
Martin's not.
That's all right.
Is he?
Graham's as well.
Yeah. Okay, if we then could go on to the next item on the agenda, which is a full planning application for land off Cherry Avenue and Snipe Clough for a cycling event, a cycling track. Bike hub, sorry, I know I get it right. And Mr. Dickman's going to introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we're on a very sort of similar theme to some extent. This is a proposal for a new recreational facility in this case, on a site which is in the countryside, but it's not in the green belt. And I think that's one of the first things to be made clear, because there's some representations that did assume it was in the green belt. The only element of the site where green belt is affected is there's an access track, which is an improvement to an existing access road. And we'll show you that on the presentation. But otherwise, it's within the defined urban area. So this is the site, just at the bottom right-hand corner. So it's the red edge, that's the application site. And the reason why it's got this really long, narrow strip is it takes it through to King's Road. So this is the vehicular access through the site, through the old, I'm not quite sure if this is the tip road. There's a bit of debate as to what actually constitutes the tip road, but it's the main road, as you know, as you go through Snipe Clough, that cuts through. It then turns off towards the site. At the moment, it's quite a narrow track, and that will be improved to provide access to the bike hub. This is an aerial photograph of that corner of the site, so it's essentially the centre of that photograph is the area that's going to be utilised for the bike hub project. So as you can see, it's mainly current open space at the moment. There are various trees and shrubs within those areas, but there are also residential properties close by. So you have some properties on Furness Avenue there at the top right-hand corner of the site, and then there are properties on Cherry Avenue and the associated streets at the bottom end of the site. What you'll also notice is this kind of, just on the bottom right-hand side, a couple of like semicircular streets. That's a redevelopment site that First Choice Homes are currently undertaking. So that area, although it looks vacant at the moment, there'll also be residential properties there as well in the future. This is a view across the site itself. So as you can see, it's open space, but it's not usable open space in its present form. The trees that demarcate the boundaries to the site, so they run round the northern and the eastern boundaries, and you might be able to, if you've got good eyesight, just be able to make out residential properties to the rear of those. So this is coming in from Furness Avenue, and you can see the existing path, which is effectively just a kind of footway pedestrian route at the moment. This is looking back from the opposite direction, so this is if you approached it from Snipe Clough direction, and you can see the levels as well, slightly higher at the back of the site. So this is where the Cherry Avenue area of the site is located. Again, just a view, again you can just see the trees behind the site and the development areas in the foreground. And there's like minimum 10-metre gap between back garden fence boundaries and the edge of the site itself. And as you'll see shortly, the actual tracks themselves are just level tracks, so there's no built development close to the houses in terms of physical structures. There is some structures that will be in the centre of the site that will service the facility, and you'll see those shortly. So this is the general arrangement of the site. So as I say, beyond the boundaries there, the south and to the north east, you've got existing, they're the closest residential properties. There's an access path comes off Furness Avenue, which is about middle of the top of that picture, then comes down through the site itself. You've then got two elements of the bike hub itself. So you have this track here, which is the more intense use of the area, and then there's a skills track, which is basically just built into the topography of the landscape. These little dots you'll see there, this is additional landscaping around the site. And as I said previously, you'll see that it doesn't extend right up to the boundaries at the back of the houses. On the left-hand side, you'll see the area where the facility buildings will be located, and we've got some pictures of those shortly. The other major element of the scheme to point out, kind of bottom left-hand corner, is a new car parking area that will be provided to service the site itself. So that will have access off Cherry Avenue. These are showing some of the site levels. When I say you're rising up towards where the residential properties are. It's fairly level within the site, but it also is showing you the kind of tracks that are just at the existing ground levels within that area. Public rights of way, there's a public footpath cuts through the site at the moment. There are two paths that actually cut through onto Cherry Avenue. Clearly where the facility is located, they will be diverted and there'll be improvements carried out to those facilities. Because of the topography of the site, to get from the bike hub up to the car park area, for instance, there will be steps there, but there'll be a facility there that allows, if you ever see these facilities, for the bike to run in a track at the side of there. Because of those levels, it's difficult to get that as a one slope, if you like, up to the top of the site. This again gives you more detail of that, so as you can see the steps coming up into the site, and then you have this car parking area, and the proposals are that that will be locked outside of the hours of operation of the bike hub itself, so which is basically between 9 and 5 for the normal daytime operations. This is giving you more detail of the car park, so as I say, you can see there's a new path that will cut round into that area, and you'll see the spaces there. There's an existing small area, kind of outdoor play court next to the site, and the car park is not immediately adjacent to the neighbouring houses. So this is the pump track layouts. As I say, this is a more intensive area of the site, and obviously the facility is not just for people to just go ride. There'll be training facilities on here, and it's more intended that this kind of facility would make those arrangements, which is about improving skills for cyclists, as well as obviously encouraging people to take up more healthy recreational pastimes. Again, here are some people that we've seen earlier going through, and again on the right hand side there you'll see what the main kind of skills track area that'll be, and that's just getting you used to that type of facility. These are the main buildings to service the site, so there'll be a bike hire facility in here, there'll be a small area in which you can buy drinks and so forth. There will be a repair facility in the site as well, but this will not obviously be open 24 hours a day, so this will only open during, if you like, the working days, probably the times, and obviously at weekends as well. Now those hours are not necessarily fixed, and obviously you could look at this in light of, particularly in the summer months, if a future operator wanted to look at expanding those hours. Obviously it's, I don't know, 7, 8 o'clock at night, it may be possible for them to come forward for that as a proposed alternative. The buildings themselves, they're fairly functional in their style, and they're intended really to give an impression of not being prominent on the landscape there. So they have a feature, it's almost like a rusted metal finish to the site, which is quite a well-used facility on there. Obviously the one on the right is indicative of what this could be like. Access tracks to the site, let's just give you an idea at the moment. Obviously in inclement weather in particular, there are issues with the access. So obviously as part of the proposal, that route will be improved. Again, these are when you get up to Furness Avenue. So again, it's just showing you the relationships of where those paths will be. The one on the right is effectively where the new car park will be located. And again, just showing an indication of the style of the paths that cut through the site. Landscaping wise, again you're effectively seeing this. So there's plenty of tree planting in the proposal. in terms of ecological enhancement, it's intended that there'll be additional planting. As you know, we have a 3-for-1 replacement scheme. We've also looked at biodiversity net gain on the site, and the site is definitely going to make positive contribution towards that. You'll notice there are conditions which have been recommended, and they deal with those issues in detail. So there will be more information coming forward in the future on the site. In terms of the main issues that we're dealing with on the site, as I say, it is open space, and policy 23 of the local plan deals with that issue, but does allow a development on open space where it enhances the use of that area for sport and recreational purposes. And as you saw from the photographs earlier on, there's very little at the moment of recreational value on the site. This will provide a much needed facility. It forms, as you know, obviously we're not dealing with Northern Routes today, but it's one element of that wider ambition to provide facilities, particularly in a deprived urban area, for getting people out, getting them to take an enhancement of recreational facilities on the site. In terms of highway issues, additional information has been provided. TFGM raised some issues with the original transport assessment, but they're now satisfied with the details that have been put forward. Clearly, there are some concerns from people in the area about the generation of traffic. The car park itself, if people know the area, to get to Cherry Avenue, it's not an obvious route through from the main strategic highway through to the site. But at the end of the day, this is a bike hub. The intention of this is to encourage people to cycle to the site. And that's where we have an expectation that the vast majority of people come from. As you travel down to the left through, as I say, towards Snipe Clough, you get towards the National Cycle Network. So the ambition obviously is that people will use those cycling routes and then come through to this as a facility in itself. You may get some groups that come to the site, and there is a minibus space that will be provided within the car parking area for small groups that the facility would allow for. The other issue that's been raised by local residents is the impact on amenity, and in particular what would happen when the hub is closed, because say it's only open, it will only be staffed during those daytime hours. There are no proposals to enclose the site, and as you can imagine, the last thing we probably want in that kind of open area is a big fence around the facility. So to some extent there won't be anything to prevent people using the site, but what we've got is a condition that looks at what measures that can be put in place. So that can be CCTV on the site, it can be putting in the extra provisions to stop unauthorised vehicle access into the facility. So again, there are issues that still need some additional detail putting forward, but there is no reason why a satisfactory arrangement couldn't be put in place. Similarly, the arrangements will be put in place to close off the car park area to prevent unauthorised use of that outside of the normal hours. So we're satisfied that the measures that can be put in place to deal with the concerns that have been raised by a number of residents in relation to amenity issues, traffic issues, antisocial behaviour, can be adequately dealt with as part of the application, as part of the conditional approval. As I say, this is obviously part of a wider ambition for the area, and this could be a first step that provides facilities that just aren't available for people in the area, and obviously it ties in with dealing with antisocial behaviour, providing an alternative outlet for people. So it's recommended for approval on that basis, subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Allen-Downey.
Thank you. I'll try and be quick because we've established this meeting can go on as long as it likes. Sport England objected, and or have I gone too far?
I think you're referring to the Northern Routes application.
Oh, I've got right. Okay, it doesn't affect this one. Sorry.
I think that we.
I've got notes.
I think you were slightly late, and we actually, that was withdrawn at the beginning of the meeting, the Northern Routes application. Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Cosgrove.
It's just a concern really about the ASB and the dirt trap pit bikes. That area is well used for them, and my concern was if it did go ahead, would there be extra security on? Because there's no fence, so they'll do what they want.
Yeah, there'd be no physical security, shall we say, on site, but you can obviously put in measures like CCTV, motion sensors and so on. First response could be attached to that. Well, this is the issue, that we've got a choice in a way. You want to provide a facility on the site. Do we want to put a big fence around it and stop people from going in? Ultimately, I think the answer to that is that we're allowing those who carry out antisocial behaviour to dictate and prevent everybody else from having a suitable facility. So it's a challenge to do that. You know, is it sufficient to review? Does everybody lose out because of that? I suppose is the only way we can look at that.
I was just raising a concern.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just following on Councillor Cosgrove's, I mean, I think it's great that we're providing this potentially to, many residents. However, my concerns are potentially, e-scooters, quad bikes, motorbikes, using this as an opportunity to just, take advantage and do all sorts and potentially damage what's been put in place and prevent kids, parents, normal residents from accessing this, or because of the antisocial behaviour that's going to may potentially come about.
Yeah, to your Chair, I think, as I think Peter was saying on some of the earlier applications, we deal with the proposal that's in front of us at the moment. The applicant and the applicant's agent is here today, so there may be issues that you might want to put to them as what they could look for. So say this did occur, say this occurred in the future, how could we deal with those types of issues?
Sorry, back to the right one. On the recommendation, it says, following the confirmation that the Secretary of State does not wish to call in the application. Is that just a lack of clarity?
We're on item 9.
Okay, is there any further questions on item 9, which is the title of... No. If not, we've got Mrs. Catherine Hammond, who's speaking on behalf of the objectors to the scheme. Mrs. Hammond? And she doesn't want a camera. Is she not? Oh, sorry, she's not here. Okay. Right. So we've got Mr. Ian Ford, who's speaking on behalf of the agent for the applicants, I presume? Yes.
That's right. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. The proposal seeks to provide a new cycle training and recreation area for a wide range of users. Associated facilities include a bike hire station, repair workshop, toilet, shower facilities, a refreshment stand and a main visitor car parking area on Cherry Avenue next to the existing games court. 3 public objections have been submitted, all relating to the proposed car park on Cherry Avenue and the potential for the proposal to create noise, disturbance and antisocial behaviour. The applicant has provided improved security measures to mitigate some of the initial concerns, and the car park is considered safe from a highways perspective and therefore should not be a reason for refusal for this application. A noise impact assessment and ecological assessment support the application, which identify no adverse impacts on noise or ecology. Mitigation has been put in place for the loss of poor quality woodland, which includes additional tree and shrub planting to enhance the biodiversity of the area. A large tree buffer already sits between the proposed site and existing houses, which will reduce the impact of noise, and due to the nature of the proposal, the noise impact assessment states that there will not be much noise made in any instance. The site is already accessible to the general public, and to the applicant's knowledge there have been no noise complaints made. The bike hub will help regenerate an area of poor quality land where fly tipping is often a problem, where the Northern Routes management team have had to clean up the site several times. Security measures have been proposed around the bike hub to mitigate the potential of antisocial behaviour. These include CCTV and centre lighting within the bike hub area. The car park at Cherry Avenue is required to help service the proposal, and the proposed location has been considered acceptable due to its proximity to the proposal and the fact that it is next to an existing multi-use games area. A transport assessment supports the planning application, which has raised no issue with the number of parking spaces proposed. These spaces will prevent cars from parking on the street, therefore avoiding congestion. To help reduce the potential of antisocial behaviour, security lighting will be proposed and a security gate will be put in place at the entrance of the car park. This form of traffic control prevents cars from leaving the site or entering after a certain time, as the gate will be locked by the site management team. Despite the small number of objections, the engagement with the general public has been very positive, with over 1,400 individuals taking part in the overall Northern Routes consultation exercise that included these proposals. To conclude, this application complements the wider proposals for Northern Routes and its vision, making it a destination for all, improving the quality of the existing space and providing a wide range of offers to the local community. The overall benefits are deemed sufficient justification to outweigh any identified harm. We therefore request you consider the proposal positively and award planning permission tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you address the issue? You haven't addressed the issue that two members have raised about illicit use out of hours and how that could be mitigated in some way.
I did pick up about the antisocial behaviours and how we've considered from the car park, closing the car park at 5 p.m. so there's no cars loitering or having unnecessary noise after hours. And in terms of the actual bike hub, we pick up on security measures including CCTV and sensor lighting. As part of the wider proposals which aren't being discussed tonight, there may be a potential for the wider management of the wider site should there be further activity going on within the Northern Routes area. More activity would hopefully reduce the impact of antisocial behaviour because there's more people watching, more people using the site for a number of uses.
Does anybody else? Councillor Landoni.
I'm on the right one this time. There's a survey about Himalayan balsam, but it only talks about eradication measures for the Japanese knotweed, and having seen problems elsewhere where it is a very aggressive species. This might be for the officers more than you, but is there a plan there to actually deal with this and eradicate it rather than, can you just flesh that out a bit?
I believe there's a condition which picks up on Japanese knotweed and the balsam.
Yeah, condition 6.
Yeah, just ask for a survey. It doesn't actually ask you to do anything about the Himalayan. Is it supposed to?
Is there any further questions of Mr. Ford? No. If not, it's open for debate. If any members have got any concerns or any worries or any things they'd like to say. Councillor Nazi.
Sorry, Chair. I pressed that button before I could. Just my concern would be that you say that you're going to have CCTV in there, but most of these quad bikes don't have registration plates and anything like that, so you won't be able to implement any, enforce anything on them. How would you stop that? And I think that would just be the main concern: is would CCTV be enough to stop antisocial behaviour? Thank you.
It's a hard one to answer because it's very specific to each site. Some areas and other bike hubs in the UK have very similar settings in this aspect because they don't want them to be enclosed because it prevents people from using them in certain ways, and because of this site it can't be enclosed because because if you see the image there, we're trying to maximise as much potential on that. So it comes back down to that wider site management aspect of it. There may be areas of or risks of antisocial behaviour, but we believe that the mitigation put in place is adequate based on our experience of knowing future previous bike hubs, and the site itself has been designed by a bike hub installator or a specialist. So we have been advised based on knowledge elsewhere.
Is there any further comments on that? If not, could I move the officer's recommendation with the associated conditions?
Seconded.
Thank you. All those in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very, very much. If we then move on to the next application, which is Knowles Mill, Wellington Road, Greenfield, and it's for the conversion of the mill into housing with 2 additional floors added. Sorry, who's dealing with this? Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good evening, members. First of all, I'd just like to draw your attention to the late list, which contains details of further representations we've received since the publication of the agenda. Don't know what's happening there. Trust it to be mine. Is that better? Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, I'd like to draw your attention first of all to the late list, which contains details of further representations we've received since the publication of the agenda. And in addition, since the agenda was published, Environmental Health have recommended a change in the conditions relating to noise, and the wording of those conditions are contained in the agenda. Just not a minute. Oh, there you go. Okay. So the site subject to the application is Knowles Mill. In Greenfield, the mill building is the sole surviving structure of what was formerly a mid-19th century industrial complex known as Wellington Mills. The building is a large rectangular 3-storey block that has stood vacant since the mills closed in the 1990s. The Oldham Mills strategy categorises the building as medium priority mill in poor condition with medium housing potential. The building is considered to be a non-designated heritage asset, so it's not listed, but it is a heritage asset. So the proposal is for the redevelopment and refurbishment of the mill, which includes upper floor extensions of 2 floors, which overall will provide 38 1-, 2- and 3-bed apartments, a new lift tower, and associated parking and landscaping. The mill building itself sits within a mixed-use UDP allocation under policy B1.3. The allocation accepts the principle of B1, now Class E, B2 uses, tourism uses, residential and retail. Therefore, the principle of residential development is considered acceptable at the site. These site pictures just really sort of emphasise the poor condition the mill building is currently in. So, as you can see, it's in a pretty poor state of disrepair at the moment, from pretty much all sides. So these slides pretty much provide sort of some visuals of how the mill building will look post-development. I do have to say that the plans submitted don't really do it justice. I've got some visuals which will follow this slide, but essentially the construction of the additional floors is required to make the scheme viable. So the upper floor extensions will be constructed in a zinc cladding, which will be inset from the existing buildings, gives a subservient appearance. The use of the cladding gives a contemporary appearance and will enable the extension to read as a clear intervention to the main building. So that probably provides a better visual of how it would look. So a lift tower will also be constructed to allow a lift to be installed in the building for future residents. The lift tower will be a dominant feature, however some of the massing will be broken up with the use of glazing, which will run almost the full length of the actual structure. So that's on a previous slide. So as you can see, there's going to be glazing along here, which will sort of break up that lift tower mass in there. and then you've got the extensions at the top there, and so you can see. The existing elevations of the mill building will be refurbished and repaired. Some window openings will be increased in size to accommodate the residential units to let adequate light into the building, and stainless steel and glass balconies will be introduced to the existing building on the southeast side. Overall, subject to agreeing the materials, it's not considered that the aesthetic appearance of the scheme will adversely affect the local character of the area, especially when considering the current state of the mill building. When we consider that in heritage terms, the redevelopment would cause less than substantial harm to the non-designated heritage asset, and this will be considered in the concluding comments of the presentation. This slide shows the typical floor plan of the proposed scheme. In terms of the internal layout, the basement will contain provision for car parking. The ground floor will also contain some external car parking spaces amounting to 38 spaces overall. The soft landscaping is also proposed at ground level within the site curtilage, the specifics of which will need to be agreed. From the ground floor to the sixth floor, the development proposes a mixture of 1, 2 and 3 bed apartments. The units proposed meet the requirements of the National Described Spacing Standards. So this sort of image just provides an image of the setting that you can see. The blue marker here denotes the site. Then you've got the Tesco to the north, Harley Botanical to the sort of south-west, and then obviously some residential properties here and Donkey Stone Brewery here. So it's got a really mixed-use immediate setting. So yeah, just throw that in there so you can see it in its sort of setting. So in terms of residential amenity, the site is not immediately surrounded by residential properties. The closest residential properties are on Wellington Road, approximately 80 metres to the north, adjacent to the Donkey Stone Brewery, so that's here. And the closest properties to the south are approximately 100 metres away on Chew Valley Road. So, flying through there. In terms of highways, the highways engineer does not consider that the development will result in additional traffic generation that will be considered as severe. The development makes provision for cycle parking, and this is supported. Overall, it is considered that the development is acceptable in highways terms. So I just thought I'd run through developer contributions as well. A viability assessment has been submitted with the application and has been independently reviewed on the council's behalf, and it was agreed that the scheme would not be viable if the council was to enforce any requirements for affordable housing and open space provision. Essentially, it's really difficult to redevelop these mills and get developer contributions because it is so expensive to redevelop that, retain and refurbish them, and also ask for affordable housing requirements and open space. And that's a view concurred with by our viability consultant. So therefore, given the outcome of the viability assessment, it's not considered reasonable for the council to pursue any Section 106 requirements if we are to retain the building and refurbish it. So finally, there are several material planning considerations, both for and against the application, which should be weighed up when making a decision. The matters in favour of the application of the mill building forms part of the retention and conversion of the mill building is considered a significant benefit and weighs heavily in favour of the development. The mill building forms part of a site that is allocated for residential development, which is in favour of it. The development will also provide a strong contribution to housing provision in Oldham, and given the scale of the building, its prominence and very poor condition, the redevelopment and refurbishment of the building would significantly enhance the setting of the area. Overall, these benefits have been given significant weight in the planning balance. The retention and the conversion of the mill building itself should be given significant weight. This, coupled with the provision for housing, the site's allocation and the enhancements to the immediate setting, only weigh further in the application's favour. There are some matters not in favour of the application. We need to be clear on that. The development is unable to make any provision for affordable housing or open space in accordance with local plan policies 10 and 21. And 2, the development will cause less than substantial harm to the non-designated heritage asset. These matters have been given limited weight in the planning balance. It has been proven through the viability assessment of the development costs that it is not possible to deliver contributions towards affordable housing and open space provision. And in relation to the harm to the damn designated heritage asset, as set out in the committee report, the benefits are significant, which include the retention and redevelopment of the existing mill building, which secures its long-term viable use. Therefore, it is considered that the benefits of the scheme outweigh the harm, and that is why it's recommended for approval. It should also be noted that late on this afternoon, United Utilities contacted me in relation to the upper floor extensions. A public sewer currently runs through the site underneath the building, and UU wanted to understand how the applicant would deal with any additional weight of the extension being placed on the existing sewer. Following a discussion with the applicant this afternoon, they have confirmed that they have already instructed a structural engineer to undertake the necessary surveys to identify the sewer's exact location and also look at what methods can be introduced to minimise any impacts on UU's assets. With that considered, it is reasonable to attach an additional planning condition that will require the applicant to submit the necessary surveys and construction management information to demonstrate that UU's assets will not be adversely impacted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask, please, with the residential parking provision, I think you said that there were 38 spaces, which would be one per apartment, but in the sentence here, I think, unless my arithmetic's incorrect, it totals 36 spaces in the report. So is there 38 spaces, so one per apartment, or is it 36 as stated?
It's 38. I've counted on the site plan, so apologies for that mistake. Yes, it is 38. I can confirm that.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions at all? No? Right, thank you very much. We do have a speaker, and that's Caroline Tamworth. If you'd like to address the committee, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of my clients, Hartley Botanic Limited, who own and occupy the premises immediately opposite the application site. The company is a major employer within the area and has operated from the site for over 80 years. The approval of this development as it stands could put the future operations at this site into jeopardy, and therefore Hartley Botanic strongly object to the development. They're particularly concerned about the impact that the construction phase of the development will have on the use of their access, particularly if the road becomes narrowed as a result of scaffolding, safety barriers, etc., whilst work takes place at the mill. The larger vehicles associated with Hartley Botanic simply cannot navigate a narrowed road, and there's only one option for the loading and unloading of the frequent deliveries of raw materials to the site and the outgoing finished products. This would have severe operational consequences for the business. To this end, we've requested that if members are minded to approve the application, then the wording of condition number 5 is amended in accordance with the note in the late list. In addition, the drainage information submitted with the planning application is not detailed enough. While several options for surface water drainage may have been highlighted within the drainage report, it's not been proven if any of these would be adequate enough to enable the development to go ahead without exacerbating the current situation. There's a long history of severe drainage problems within this part of the village, with premises including Hartley Botanic suffering flooding on a regular basis. The lower ground floor of the warehouse during periods of wet weather is often to be found under 12 inches of water, which causes damage to racking, equipment and materials and interrupts processes. United Utilities are well aware of the situation, which has been occurring for years, and it's surprising and worrying that they or the Environment Agency have not addressed this ongoing issue in their consultation responses or requested more rigorous and detailed investigations into the impacts of the development before a decision is made. The current drainage system for both surface water and foul water has already proven to be consistently substandard. In connecting additional properties to the system, this is going to have a catastrophic effect if the correct drainage system is not implemented. The lack of detail is unacceptable for a major development scheme with an area falling within a recognised flood zone and one that currently experiences regular flooding. An assessment needs to acknowledge and address the ongoing flooding problems within the area. The drainage details appear to focus on safeguarding the new development rather than the existing. It's noted that a condition relating to drainage would be attached to the approval, but it's our view that more detailed assessment addressing the current flooding problems is required before planning permission is granted, as it's fundamental to the principle of the scheme. For the reasons that I've mentioned, the proposed development should be refused as it stands, or at least deferred whilst additional detail is requested from the applicants with regards to the drainage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions of the speaker? I don't know whether you want to address the questions around drainage that's been mentioned.
Just on drainage, I have spoken to the lead local flood authority in relation to the flood risk assessment that was submitted by the applicant. They do put forward a range of options, and at this stage they haven't fixed which option or what options they will choose to attenuate any additional surface water that comes as part of the development. But what the LLFA's view is that what they are putting forward is not considered to be unreasonable, and it's not considered to be undeliverable. So they feel comfortable in
recommending a condition in relation to surface water on that basis. I haven't had any objection from United Utilities on the basis of surface water, only concerns in relation to the extension and the public sewer. So with that considered, we have to take the advice of our technical consultee and go on with the condition for surface water.
And just to add to what Mr Gill's been saying, I mean, just to address one of the concerns raised by Ms Tamworth, that in terms of the existing situation, whatever that may be, in terms of drainage and flooding, again, those of you who've been on committee for a while will have heard me say this before, but we cannot require a new development to fix existing problems. It can only not make it worse. So as long as the technical consultees that Mr Gill referred to are ultimately satisfied through the discharge of condition process that what is proposed will not make the existing situation worse, we cannot refuse on that basis.
Councillor Alan-Darnay.
Sorry, because if we were responding to those, there was the query about the neighbouring business and the consultation.
I think it was around access, wasn't it? And you know, would you address that? As,
We have attached a condition in relation to construction management. I mean, there's been no concerns in relation to highways or traffic management from any of our consultees, technical consultees. So with that considered, again, we have to take lead from our technical consultees. If they don't believe there's going to be an issue from a construction management point of view, it's considered reasonable to attach a condition, which we have. I'll leave it to members to debate whether they would like the business Ms Tamworth mentions as having an input into the construction management plan. I'm not sure if we can do that. Can we?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could potentially include them in, but obviously there is that sense of it's not a, they can't be held, the applicant can't be held to ransom in terms of that element. It's obviously it's a being engaged and included and their views considered, but ultimately it's for us as an authority when that condition comes to be discharged to determine are we happy with the construction environment management plan.
is there any further observations? Questions on this? No? Right, we'll go into a debate of where we want to go with it. Does anybody want to say anything? If not, I will. Well, Councillor Alan-Darnay.
Were you about to? I mean,
I was going to propose we approve it.
I was going to propose we approve with an adjustment, just to say that they will be consulted.
Yes, I was going to that. Yes, I think that I will propose to the committee that we approve it with a slightly amended condition that we actually, in the management plan, that we consult the, I can't recollect, is it botanical? Yeah. Yeah. Are we happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Is that seconded at all?
It's seconded.
Thank you. So it's seconded. Right. Has anybody got any comments before we move to the vote? If not, all those in favour, please show. Thank you. That's unanimously approved. Thanks very much indeed. If we move on to the next item, which is Longdale Close, Royton, and it's before the committee because the applicant is related to a councillor. I don't know whether you want to say anything, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, so thank you, Chair. So item number 11, 1 Longdale Close, Royton. It's simply a single-storey rear extension to the property and with a new roof over its garage. The applicant is a relative of Councillor Harrison, so it's just purely for transparency reasons in accordance with our constitution and scheme of delegation. It's been brought to committee. There's no objections, and it's considered by officers to be fully compliant with all of our adopted policies in relation to residential amenity and design it's recommended for approval.
Anybody got any comments on it? If not, I'll move approval. Is that seconded? All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Again, the next item is because I think the applicant is a council employee, and it's at 1079 Middleton Road, Chadderton, and it's a single-storey rear extension.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this, as you said, straightforward householder application for a single-storey side extension. The applicant is an employee of the council on a pay grade, which requires the application to be referred to committee for determination, and similarly to the previous application, it is considered to be compliant with our policies on amenity and design.
Has anybody got any comments on it? If not, I'll move approval. Is that seconded? Yeah. All those in favour? Okay, that's approved. And the last item on the agenda is planning appeals update. There's not many of them before us today. I don't know whether anybody's got it. It's there for any observations or comments. Has anybody got anything to say on them? No? Okay, we'll note them. Thank you very much indeed. And that concludes the minutes and the meeting. And thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you, Chair.